Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donahue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donahue, and my cohort in creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to the show. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present, and we are talking about a creep today who had a Netflix special. It's a good place to go when I'm looking for creeps, sort of just like, what documentaries do they have on Netflix?
Oh, I thought maybe you were going to talk about some comedian or something when you said it's special on Netflix.
You know what? Yeah. We need to do another comedians roundup too. We did
I
one
think
before.
we do.
Yeah, and it's like one of our biggest episodes. We are on Facebook. We have a basic Facebook page. We don't really use it because people just go there to complain about our language, which is my way of saying we use salty language in this program.
Fuck yeah.
If you want to join our Facebook group, it is a private group, and you do need to answer 3 questions in order to get in. It should be pretty easy to do that. Just kind of listen to the front part of the show, and you're in like Flynn. I shouldn't have said that when we talked about Errol Flynn before.
Nobody wants to be that Flynn. So gross.
We're on Twitter at Creepod because somebody had What a Creep for 10 years on Twitter and never used it.
Creep.
We're on Instagram at What a Creep Podcast. Please follow us there. We have a basic old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast, spell that all out, at gmail.com. You can send comments and suggestions there. We love for creeps and for non-creeps. Also, if you're looking for stickers, we're happy to send those in the mail to you. And Sonia, do you want to talk about the website?
Yes, you can go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. And it has links to almost all of our episodes. Some are behind the Patreon wall, and there's a link to our Patreon page. More on that in a second. And a link to our merch shop, where I have uploaded a new design. Get your Damn It Max mug or tote bag in our merch shop. I ordered a mug instantly. Of course, it will be here any second now. I will take a picture and post it in the group because I think it turned out pretty cute.
Sonia has the most clever ideas, you guys, for merch. Definitely check out our merch store.
Thank you for saying that.
And
you're nice.
I'm just being honest, dude. Okay. And on Patreon, we have our first 3 seasons on Patreon. If you want to support the show that way, you just go to Patreon, look up What a Creep Podcast. We also put out, we'll send you some stickers if you'd like, but we also have a newsletter that comes out, and we put out 2.
Yes.
Dude, we just did it. Check your spam folder. Yes.
It's out there.
And we also put out 2 bonus episodes a month. We really appreciate all of you that do that to support us. I want to give a special shout out to Joe, Tiffany, Alex, and LJ for all joining in the last week or so. Everybody that's asked me for stickers, by the way, I am going to send a bunch out to you. It's just been like in the 20s, and it's not raining, it's snowing
so
and icy, and
there.
it's just, I can't get out there. So, but as soon as it gets a little bit better, I promise to get it out to you. Also, if the show sounds a little bit different, we joined Spreaker. They contacted us. We're really excited. So we're making a little bit of money now, but that's going to really help us with resources growing the show, because our dream is actually one day when the world isn't the garbage fire that it is, we'll go on the road and we'll do some shows, and we want to do other things, and we want to be able to hang out with you guys. So let's keep that in mind.
That's the dream.
It is the dream, and it's a good dream.
It is.
All right, Sonia. Are you ready to talk about our creep?
I am very ready.
All right, I'm getting up my notes. His name is Mark Hofmann, and I wanted to know, did you see the Netflix special Murder Among Mormons?
No, it is on my list, but I haven't gotten to it yet.
This is awesome. Okay. This is a story I read. I'll mention the book in a second, but there is this paperback novel about murder in Salt Lake City. And this book was so incredible. It was really like 500 pages or something, but I read it. My mom took it from me. My dad took it from her. My sister took it from him. We were all obsessed with this story. And it always seemed weird to me. This was in the late 80s, this happened, that nobody really talked about it. And it happened in 1985 in Salt Lake City. And it's about the LDS culture. LDS is, well, let me say this. Mark Hofmann had a Netflix documentary series that highlighted his criminal activity in the 70s and 80s in Salt Lake City, Utah, the home of the Mormon Church. They're also known as LDS, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They prefer Latter-day Saints. I keep saying Mormons, but there I go. Anyway, in Murder Among Mormons, you learned about the crime spree of Mark Hofmann. He started on Tuesday, October 15th, 1985. It involved 2 people being killed by homemade bombs he created and left for them. What motivated this? By all accounts, he was considered a good Mormon and a perfect family man. In this episode, I will go into his background as a world-class forger and a liar who ran himself and other people into so much debt, he felt that he had to set off bombs as a way to buy him time to figure out his financial problems. He really did that for that reason, and we're going to get into it.
I got so excited when you said, like, I'm going to do a forger. And I was like, ooh, how light. And you were like, brr, he actually killed a bunch of people. And I was like, oh, never mind.
A couple of trigger warnings, murder and sociopathy. I also want to say I'm going to give my version of the background on the Mormon Church. Now, it's not on the level of South Park or the musical on Broadway. I think I have kind of a good handle on it, but I don't want to be offensive to people. I want to say I'm an agnostic, but I was raised Catholic. I was raised with religion. I have family that are Baptists. I have friends that are Muslim. I'm not, I don't want to sound like I'm making fun of faith because I'm not. It's something we get accused of. It's not a thing that I'm doing, but there's going to be some wackiness to the story and you're going to figure out why as we go along. So.
Yes, and we do get accused of that a lot, that we are making fun of religion. And I would not say that I don't think we do that. I think we're totally fine. You believe what you want to believe. Right. We just don't want people hurting each other. Like, if you're using your religion to like hate on people and hurt people, then we're probably going to make fun of you.
Or rip people off. Or,
yes.
you know, any other thing. So that's
Yeah, just be a good person.
Yes. Be a good Christian, man. Be one of the good ones. Okay. My sources, Mark Hofmann, his Wikipedia page, of course, Esquire Magazine, Deseret News, which is owned by the Mormon Church, by the way, in case you didn't know that. Bustle, the Netflix documentary, Murder Among the Mormons, Forensic Files, Season 2, Episode 11, Postal Mortem is what it's called.
Ooh.
It's kind of gruesome. It has the actual death scene, so just kind of giving you a warning about that.
Oh, okay. Be careful.
It's old school Forensic Files where it's like 30 minutes and like, boom, they show you like the crime scene. You're like, ugh. And then they go to a reenactment. Yeah. It's very strange, but it's pretty informative. Also, this is a book that I was talking about, The Mormon Murder, A True Story of Greed, Forgery, Deceit, and Death by Stephen Nafa and Gregory White Smith. Great reading. It's pretty spectacular, this story.
All right.
Now, what do you know about Mormonism?
Not a lot. We had here in the Bay Area, I don't know if these were national, we had a lot of public service announcements that were about like the Church of Latter-day Saints. Like,
yeah.
Do you know what ones I'm talking about? Where it was like about telling the truth or being kind to your kids and acknowledging their good things.
Yes.
Do you have these where, like, you know, I broke your window with my ball and I'm here to confess, you know? Do you remember these at all?
Oh, now you're like blowing my mind.
It was like, Mr. Robinson, what a horrible mess. I broke your window with my ball and I've come to confess. And then, you know, it's like, you told the truth. And it was all these ads for these churches about like having good morals.
That was freaking amazing.
Nobody wants me to sing. I just made our listeners go down.
No.
Sorry, everybody.
No, they're lighting their Bic lighters saying more.
Rock!
This church started with Joseph Smith in Western New York. And this is sort of the region that Nexium is at. There's the Seneca Falls. There's this part of New York State, very, very beautiful, a lot of foliage. It's the mountains. It's gorgeous. That kind of inspires people to be spiritual. And Joseph Smith had a vision one day, and he's about 19 years old. And there's a few versions. This is the first starts because we watch Real Housewives of South Lake City, and a couple of the women there say, we're pioneer Mormons, meaning that their great-grandfathers were Mormons. Like, wow. Like, anywhere else in the world.
History.
Yes. Hindu, Muslim, Catholic, like they go on for centuries, if not millenniums. But this is a pretty young religion, is being my point. It started, let's say, like 200 years ago. And Joseph Smith had a vision, and it was an angel named Moroni. And Moroni appeared in his dreams and said, God wants you. God wants you to spread the new word of Jesus Christ. So we had the Old Testament, BC, which is our Jewish friends. That's what they have in the Torah. We have the New Testament, which is for most Christians, what the Bible is to us. And this is the Book of Mormon that they come up with. So the Moroni says, go out in those woods, and you're going to dig up and find these gold plates. And on these gold plates, it's written out this New Testament of Jesus, because Jesus went from the Middle East to upstate New York.
Yeah, sure. It's beautiful there. I get it.
It's gorgeous. I get it. This is. I was raised Catholic. We're told a lot crazier stuff than that. So I'm like, okay. Joseph Smith, and I always think of South Park. My dad loved that episode. We would just think about Joseph Smith, dum 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 dum, because Joseph Smith had these gold plates, and then he said that he transcribed them, which was written in old school Hebrew. So how did this kid from New York know old school Hebrew? I don't know. And then he put the papers away, and then he kind of lost the gold plates. They don't know where they went. And he goes around and tells people, I got a new church, and Jesus, this is what Jesus wants. Jesus not only was resurrected, Jesus came to America, and he told all the white people, you're better than the black people. And black people were not allowed to be priests in the church until the late 1970s. So there's this, and there's racism in other religions as well.
Yes,
but it is
for sure.
Sort of this founding belief, you're special because you're white. You're what God wants. Also, there is Zion, and Zion is in Western America, or it's somewhere in America. It's not in Bethlehem. It's not in Middle East. It's in, they're coming to America today. And y'all need to get your peeps together and preach this. Mormons, in and of themselves, I mean, if you're talking about people who are quote unquote good Mormons, tend to be people who are go to church every Sunday. It's called tithing, I think it's how you pronounce it, where you give 10% of your income or your family income to the church. You do not drink alcohol. You do not have hot caffeinated drinks. You can have pop or soda, but not that.
Why the distinction, I wonder?
I cannot quite figure that out for myself. And it's funny because, and what you're going to have is like people, over the years, people talk about, well, let me say this. Joseph Smith, he and his band go together and they decide that polygamy is the only way we're going to get, a group of followers. The more babies you have.
That's their benefit, their key benefit. Like, you can have lots of wives.
And they could take care of each other, and you could just pat the kids on the head and then go about your business.
Dudes are like, tell me more.
It's business. It's business.
It's business time. This is our musical episode.
It is indeed. He's going to go out west, and first he stops in Missouri, in Jackson County, and first they're met with people. Believe it or not, they had slaves up in Missouri. I thought it's not mainly a Southern thing. And those people, the slaveholders there were like, what kind of Fakakta religion is this? They didn't say Fakakta. They don't know Yiddish. But they're saying like, what are you guys talking about? What do you mean Jesus came to America? That's ridiculous. And people got upset. And Joseph Smith decided that he was against the owning of slaves, and that they were going to buy it. What they decided was, what you need to do is you move someplace and you buy everything around you, make it like that's your turf, right? Like tough turf,
all right,
which we'll cover one day for dorking out.
We totally will. It's on the list.
He gets to the point where he has 15,000 followers. And the followers and then the people that were there originally, the Missourians. Is that the show?
You're talking about Twitter. You're talking about Twitter followers, right?
Basically, yeah. All influencers.
He bought them.
All these LDS influencers are in this little town in Missouri. That's how people say it there. Is that the Show Me State? I think it is.
I don't know.
Okay. But they're there, and there's conflict going on. And Joseph Smith is in and out of jail for various reasons in his life. But he gets sent to jail, and just to make long story short, he's killed while he's in jail. His people are trying to get him to escape. He becomes this martyr. And there's a Joseph Smith III that's thinking he's the one that's going to get the job to lead everybody, because someone has to be led. And the thinking is that the men that are at the top level, and it's always men, are the ones that they're the bishops, and they're being instructed by God on what you do. And so they're like, well, what God's going to tell us is somehow who's going to be the next person that's going to be in charge of this ship. And that person is Brigham Young. And Brigham Young was much older. John Smith Jr. was a kid, and Brigham Young was like a name like Brigham Young. You just picture crusty, old, big, charismatic, like, let's go. And he just woke up one day and said, God told me I'm in charge and we're going to Utah. This is the truncated version of everything.
God is so talkative.
Yeah.
I don't think we don't discuss that enough.
Is one of the criticisms people have. Like, God has an awful lot of time to give this 19-year-old kid in New York when there's like so much going on. It's one of those things people say. So this is in 1877, Brigham Young, they move out west, and that's what they call the pioneers thing. They did what white Americans did, that were not Mormon. They killed people and went along and just took what they wanted and manifest destiny and all that other crap. And they settled all that crap, and they settle in Utah, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful place. And they set up, and what happens is as they go along, they figured out you have to make your own community. So you have to make your own banks, your own schools, your own everything. That's kind of okay. So Brigham Young, he sets it up there. And then Utah gradually becomes powerful. And they have their own senators, and they become a state, and they have all this other crap. Okay. So let's go back to our asshole this week, Mark Hofmann. He was born December 7th, 1954, and he had in Salt Lake City, and had a traditional Mormon family. He had a mother and a father, and he had several siblings. And the parents, here's a big thing with Mormons, they have a family night. They're very much into family connection. So you turn the TV off or whatever. Well, they didn't have TVs back then, but their whole thing was you get together as a family at least once a week. It's very patriarchal. You call your mother and father. It's very strict. And, some people are more loving than other people, but it's, there's an idea of like, modesty, not wearing flashy clothes. And the big one, no premarital sex, no drinking, no drugs, no coffee, no sex. You would not see, that's no Margot. That's like,
it's so weird that coffee would be lumped in with that, but okay.
Yeah. Well, I think like Mitt Romney, when he was running for president, like what happened all the time is reporters would write like he got a soda while he was at the shop, and he would get upset about it. It's like, no, I'm allowed to have soda. I'm like, okay, but anyway, don't explain that to me. I don't care.
Also, just even if he did have a coffee, who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
what are his policies?
Yeah, we have people running for president who are Christian, Catholic, whatever, and they also pick and choose which parts of the religion they want to honor and which ones they don't. So
that's one of the people I'm going to talk about today. So that's
Yes.
a good point to bring up.
Yeah.
I also want to say that, let me just go back a little bit here. There has been in the past negative stories about the Mormon Church. The Mormon Church becomes very powerful, especially like around the 1950s. And tithing is meant to keep the church popular, keep the church dripping in money, basically. The church just owns stocks. It owns property. If you want to be a good Mormon, you're meant to go on a mission, which we're around 2021. And it's an honor to go. Your bishop tells you where you're going to go. And it could be Brooklyn. It could be New Zealand. You would never see me again. I would just stay there. It could, be Iceland. It could be Reykjavik.
Yeah.
It could be anywhere. You pay your own way, or your family has to pay your own way. The church doesn't give a dime for that. The church doesn't have like programs for the community. So there's this whole thing about that. And the church got involved with the Boy Scouts, was always a huge proponent of the Boy Scouts, a great place for boys to go. Full of molesters, it turns out. And a lot of these victims would come forward and tell their bishops, this camp leader is doing this to me. And many were told, well, talk to God and ask God what he wants you to do. And they would just kind of move the guy around, but they didn't take care
just
of the
like
problem.
the Catholic Church.
Just like the Catholic Church. So,
yeah. And the Catholic Church also money everywhere.
Yeah. And never has to pay out a freaking dime.
Scientology, the same.
Yes.
Like,
there was an abuse claim in 2017, and there was $250 million paid out, and the church had to take care of that. And the church was like, okay, it's just like a drop in the bucket.
It's like nothing to them.
Right. We talked a few weeks ago about Canadian residential schools and American residential schools, which were funded by the Catholic Church at first. The Mormons also went through a phase where they were adopting Mexican kids, but they weren't exactly legal what was being done. They've had their own scandals, as being my point. So there's, it's known for a place where it's God and country. It's it's called testimony. When you are asked by your bishop or anybody, the other people at church ask you, do you have faith? Do you believe? Your answer is always supposed to be yes. And if you do anything that's not right, you have to confess. And that is a big, big deal. Lying is not good. And no matter what, confess. You got an assignment and you're going to go to Hawaii to do your ministry, and you're freaking psyched, and you have sex the night before you go. You have to tell your bishop, because if they find out later, you could get kicked out of the church because you did not. You didn't confess. It's not even like not telling the truth. It's not confessing. It's a big, big deal.
That's why if I break a window with my ball, I better come to confess. Thank you, public service ad from the 70s.
Also, another thing about it's about atonement, and atoning it's not enough to just say I'm sorry or I did something wrong. It's you have to make up for what you did. And in the Mormon faith, there are different levels when you're going to church. That if you're not a member, you can't go and you can't witness. And there's some Masonic sort of like type things that happen. But one of them in the old days, I don't know if they still do this, but it's a gesture where you would take your thumb and it's like you would scrape it across your throat. And that's known as blood atonement. And Brigham Young was really big on, like, if you did something wrong and you crossed him, he would cut your throat and spill your blood on the ground. Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. When we talked about Gary Gilmore a few weeks ago, he was a person that was convicted in Utah of murder. And then this was just when the death penalty came back in America. And he said, I want to be shot in the heart. I want my blood to spill on the ground, because his parents were Mormon. And he says, I have to do blood atonement. So this is kind of the level that it's at.
Okay.
Like, it's not enough to say, oops, I'm sorry, like the kid does.
Yeah.
Like, it's more like,
Right.
you really screwed up. What are you going to do? There is a hell, kind of, but they're more into heaven, and there's three kinds of heaven. There's celestial and testial and whatever. Testicular, I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But there's different levels. So if you're really amazing Mormon, you're in celestial, and your other family will be there, and you'll be a god there. Not here, there.
Yeah.
And then there's lesser levels. You know, your Jeffrey Dahmers and stuff like that go to different places. Okay.
Right. They go to testicular
Yes.
heaven.
And they get kicked in the balls.
Yeah, and then that's where you're going to have a ball. Testicular heaven.
For children.
I like the idea that you go there and you just get kicked in the balls over and over.
That's your purgatory.
That's your purgatory. Exactly. I love it.
Very Three Stooges. You know, then poke them in the eye. I try to think, but nothing happens. Oh, okay. Good times. Good times. So this is Mark Hofmann we're talking about. His parents are very strict. No drugs, no nothing. Mark is an Eagle Scout. Mark goes to Utah State when he's 17, 18 years old. It's the 70s at this point. He's born in 1954. And his mother notices that on his dorm wall, he has a poster of Farrah Fawcett, that very famous one with the red bathing suit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, no. And she buys him a poster, and it's basically a Mormon saying, you know, like, hang in there, baby, or whatever.
The cat on the branch.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Faith isn't faith until it's all you're holding on to. Anyway, Mark is at this point, he does go on a mission to England. And then when he's in England, he likes to go to old bookshops and look for old books. And before that, he was really into coins, and he loved to take, if you find coins and they have some sort of slight damage to them, they can actually be worth more money than it says on the coin. Like a dime can be like $20 if it's got some kind of a mark on it. And he started by trying to redo those marks and then sending them to the treasury and then getting money for them. He's like a teenager when he's doing this. So he's already... He goes to England. He goes to these bookshops and he starts doing the thing like in Scientology and Mormonism. He's like, just don't go on the internet and look things up. Like, you don't need that. We're telling you the truth. This is all you need. And he's looking up this stuff. And he decides, and he said it was on 14, really decided. He decides he becomes an atheist. Like he not only just doesn't believe this, but it's all, like he doesn't even believe in God. But he doesn't tell anybody. He comes back to the States and he goes back to Utah and he starts dating a woman. And the parents think she's a little hot to trot, and don't think and he's a pre-med student, by the way. But they're like, all right, you're almost like 21 years old. You got to get married and start having a family. And
chop. Come on.
And he marries Dory Olds is her last name, in 1979. And they immediately have 3 kids.
Damn.
And Mark has to find now a way to make a living. And he's not exactly a job person. And the thing with Mark is that he's one of those, he's very intelligent, but he thinks being sarcastic is funny. Like he's very off-putting. When he smiles, he doesn't show his teeth. He's very creepy. He gives people the creeps. He has some sort of social stuff going on. He's just not, but he puts out like, I'm a great Mormon. I got a wife. I've got kids. He's really nice to the kids. When somebody in the neighborhood, her roof was coming in, he had a bunch of people organized and they fixed her roof. And
nice.
He does nice things like that. But he really just wants to be in the documents business. He's all about forgery and documents and old books and old letters. And he starts going to booksellers and saying, hey, I've got this George Washington signature. Would this be worth something to you? And he sold an Emily Dickinson poem that nobody had ever seen before. And he's selling. Oh my God. Yeah.
Like he's just writing poems and like signing her name and.
Wait till I get to that part.
Okay. Roses are red, violets are blue. This poem is by Emily Dickinson. How about you? I'm not a poet, y'all. Sorry.
No Nipsey Russell you. He starts in this business and he buys some rare books and then he sells them, but he's really into documents. That's his jam, and coins. And he becomes friends with all the people that are into coins and documents and things like that. And one day he comes up with something and he goes to a seller and says, I got this weird document and it's about Joseph Smith. And it's from Joseph Smith, and he's writing about when he first heard about Mormonism, when God first came to him. And it's this crazy story how he's in bed and he's having hallucinations. And then all of a sudden a white salamander appears. And the white salamander looks at him and says, hey, you need to go out in the woods and get those gold plates. Like those Geico commercials where they have...
Yes.
That's what I picture.
You can also save on your car insurance.
Exactly. And he's talking in an Australian accent. Like, that's all I could think of.
Mm-hmm.
And the church is like, that's going to make him look like a crazy person, Joseph Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the church does have a history department, but there's some people that are like, buy everything, put it away, and we'll talk about it. I'm saying in air quotes in public when we're ready. And there's some people that are like, look, transparency, just put it all out there. And if you have faith, you have faith. And if you don't, you don't. But that's like, just, you got to keep it honest, because that's supposed to be one of our core values. And the church is like, oh man, we want to buy this, but we'll look bad if we buy this. And that's where Steve Christensen comes in, and he's about the same age as Mark. They're about 30 years old at this point. And Steve is a good Mormon, and he's been in the business world. And what happens a lot also in Mormonism is there's MLMs, multi-level marketing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of keeping up the... If you're going to have a lot of kids, you should have a big house. You should have a good school. You should be great at everything that you do. That costs money. And people go into debt trying to be a great Mormon. Mm-hmm. And that's the case with Christensen. 30 years old, has 3 kids. And he's doing these jobs where he's selling, but he really wants to be a documents person. But people are like, yeah, no, you're a dad now. You can't be that. He somehow comes up with $40,000 and pays for this and then donates it to the church. And this puts Steve in standing at the church. Like, Steve is awesome. He looks like a Mormon. He acts like a Mormon. And the fun thing about Steve, for the kids that look up to him, is he's super like, look, just believe what you want to believe. Don't tell anybody anything they don't need to know. And one kid wanted to tell him that he had sex before he went on a mission. And Steve goes, don't tell me anything. That's between you and God. Just figure that out. That's what it's ultimately going to be anyway. Don't stress about it. So the kids loved him. They were like, he's awesome.
We can do whatever we want.
We can do whatever we want. And he's in business with a man named Gary Sheets, and they're selling things to people. And they're selling solar panels, and they're selling all kinds of crap, and they're not doing very well. And they hire people to be salespeople, and then they hire people to invest in businesses, and the people are losing their money. And it's a big old shit show. That's what's going on over there. Meantime, Mark Hofmann somehow manages to find every document you could possibly imagine pertaining to Mormonism, good and bad. A lot of it's bad. A lot of it's negative. Lots of things that say Joseph Smith was crazy and Brigham Young was crazy and evil, and they drank and they had extramarital affairs and they did this. Blah, blah, blah. You know what happens with the church every once in a while? There's like a new Bible that comes out or a new...
Yes.
Right. And he also gets signatures from people, like he'll get a book and it's Mark Twain signing a book to Jack London. It's ridiculous. The specificity. And it's people saying things like, I would love a signed book by Mark Twain to Jack London. And and he go, oh, I'll see what I can find. Like a week later he shows up. Is this what you were looking for? And he does this thing where he spends the money as soon as he gets it in. He doesn't know how to manage his money. So his wife is saying, it's feast or famine. Either we're going out to dinner and we're eating great, or it's like boxes of cereal for weeks. Like it's this, and she never doesn't know what he does. He's in the basement all the time, or he's flying all over the place. And Mark is a dorky guy. Just picture just a basic dork. And he has a friend named Shannon Flynn, and he's also a basic dork. He's even dorkier than this guy. And one of their favorite things to do is to go into their MR2, their Toyota MR2, which is like their sports car.
Okay.
Is to drive out into the desert and just blow shit up, like Uzis and weapons. And they read that.
Sure.
What's that
Like
man?
you do.
Yeah, it's male energy that I don't have that thing in my DNA. But they also it's something like the something cookbook, where it's this document where teaches people how to make bombs. Do you know this book I'm talking about?
What? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember the name. I'm gonna look it up.
Okay.
It's like
it's this book that was banned. It's like famously banned. And then the people who publish it were sued because somebody was killed.
Is it like the anarchist cookbook?
Yes, the anarchist cookbook. So that's something they read, and they talk about bombs, and they talk about shooting people, and they're like very aggro. And then they go to places like, we're selling Mormon documents. Like there's this dichotomy going on.
I've got this copy of The Shining signed by Jesus. Like that?
Jesus on the Wonder Wheel, the little wheel thing, the wheelie thing going down the hallway. Red Rob. Okay, so let's go to what we're really talking about. So that he's in debt, and he's not only getting himself in debt, he's getting people, other businesses, and people like mom and pop businesses that sell coins and used books, borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars, giving them checks back that bounce. He's in a shitload of trouble, and he's selling this thing called these papers to the church, and it's supposed to be like the most explosive thing ever, and it's this trope of papers that you're going to want to lock them away as soon as you buy them from me. He doesn't have them, and and the clock is ticking. Like, he owes this person money. He keeps saying, I'll get paid next week, and he doesn't have the time to forge these papers. On the morning of October 15th, 1985, Steve Christensen is going to his office, and he's got his 6 packs of Tab. That was his favorite drink. Yeah, I went with this guy. He had donuts. I was like, I'm with this guy. Yeah, that's an excellent combination.
Love it. Tab and donuts.
I love it. And it's 8 a.m. It's early. He's there first, and he notices there's a box by the door, and it's addressed to him. He picks up the box, and the next thing you know, there's a big explosion. And he's killed instantly. And the people from the building, they all go to check in on him, and there's like, it's crazy. There's cans of Tab everywhere, like going off, and there's blood everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
And the door was blown off, and it turns out the bomb was wrapped with nails, so that when it exploded, it's gruesome. And the news is going out, because this doesn't happen in Utah.
No.
So the cops are going everywhere trying to figure out, is there a mad bomber? And then Gary Sheets, the man I mentioned before, who's losing his business, who was working with Steve Christensen, who was going to also, by the way, tell the bishops about his bad dealings, Gary's bad dealings. His wife, his 50-year-old wife, Kathy, was going for her regular walk and comes home, and she sees a box. And it's addressed to her husband, and she picks it up, and she's killed instantly.
Oh my God.
And then there's cops everywhere, and then people are trying to figure out what's the connection. They both, they worked together. Are they in the mafia? Is there something going on with the church? Like, there's something, people are scared to death. And they're spreading out everywhere, and they're telling everybody that's had business with them to be aware. Don't travel, just stay home. Don't, and there's a few people that's probably what saved their lives, because Mark had a third bomb.
Oh my gosh.
And the next day he was going to deliver it. But Mark kind of fucked up putting the bomb in his car, and it exploded on him.
Oh, snap.
And it got in his leg, it hurt his ankle. It was his lower part of his body that mainly was blown up. And the first person that comes along notices that, and some Mormons wear long underwear under their underwear.
Yeah.
It's like, right. So he notices that's on Mark, and the guy gives him this special liquids, this ointment, and says, "I command you not to die," which apparently is something Mormons can say to each other.
Okay.
I don't know. Anyway.
Did it work?
It did, because Mark didn't die.
All right.
the cops come over and they're trying to check out the scene, and they're asking him, "Are you okay? Did something happen? What's going on?" And Mark's just like, "I have no idea. I don't know. I was just in my car, blah, blah, blah." He goes to the hospital and he passes a lie detector test, which this is why I don't believe in a lie detector test, because if you're a sociopath like Mark is, you can just pass it.
Right.
The police, they get the documents experts out there working on this case. And because they realize like something's up with Mark. He doesn't really have a job. He owes a lot of money to a lot of people. He has a basement nobody can get to. Nobody understands what's going on. And eventually they find out that he's been this whole time forging every single thing that he sold. And he'd been selling for years. Multiple items.
Oh my gosh. So many people. He ripped off so many people.
So many people. And they don't know how many are out there. Because he was that good. That he was that precise. He really knew what he was doing. And he realizes that at first he pleads innocent. And the person that he was scared of is not the executioner, but his own father. Because his father knows he's full of shit. And his father's like, you have to confess. You have to confess, and you have to do a blood atonement.
I have to confess.
And Mark's kind of like, yeah, but I don't want to do that atonement thing. And he strikes up a deal, and he's given a kind of a shitty sentence. It's like a few years, and it's second-degree murder.
What?
But he has to give his testimony before they give him his real sentence. Like they give him, death by shooting or whatever is off the table. There's no death penalty here. And they ask him questions, and they're like, "So why did you do this?" And he said, "Well, I just wanted to distract people so it'd give me time to make some money." And they said, "Well, why did you pick the people you picked?" He goes, "I don't know. I just needed to pick somebody." And they're like, "Well, why did you pick Kathy Sheets? I mean, she's innocent." And he's like, "Look, I didn't care if it was a kid or a dog or anybody. I just wanted that bomb to go off."
Oh my God. What a fucking monster.
He's a monster. He gets convicted. He's sentenced to life, basically. And he's not going to get paroled. His wife divorces him eventually in a short amount of time. He's been in prison ever since. He tried to commit suicide once. He had some sleeping pills stashed away. But other than that, he's never given an interview. He's never talked about it ever since then. He's still in prison now. And that is our creep this week, Mark Hofmann.
Dude, good job. What a fucking creep. What a psycho.
He is a psycho. I do have...
There's just easier ways to make money, dude.
There's always easier ways to make money. And it's like, and his whole thing was he really wanted to expose the Mormon Church. And it's like, it didn't work.
That's not the way to do it.
I want to say that his ex-wife, Dory, she is doing okay. It took her a while. The kids were babies when this all happened. And so her younger ones had to go to relatives while she figured herself out. Because like one day you have a nice house and kids, and the next day you have nothing.
You don't, right?
So she wasn't kicked out of the church. So some people in the church took care of her. But when her youngest son was a little bit older and at the age where he can go in a ministry, he didn't have the money for the clothes you need to wear because they were those specific suits.
Right.
And Steve Christensen's dad had a store that just sells those clothes. And somebody approached him and said, "We have a kid that's got no money, single mother, and he can't afford to go on this mission, but he really wants to, but he doesn't have these clothes. But we should warn you, it's Mark Hofmann's kid." And he said, "I don't care. I'm just going to give him the clothes." And he said it actually was the most freeing thing ever, that he lost his anger because he was able something nice can come out of it.
It's not the kid's fault.
No.
Yeah, that's nice of him.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's our creep this week.
Good
Mark
job.
Hofmann. Thank you.
Are you ready for someone who's not a creep?
Hell yeah.
You are so ready. Okay, hold on. Let me pull up my notes. Do you know who Bessie Coleman is?
I do not. I know Bessie Smith, but not Bessie Coleman.
Okay. This was a recommendation from our listener, Mary. It was very nice of her to do that. Like we say, we need help finding not creeps.
Yeah.
This was really helpful. So thank you, Mary, for sending this one my way. Bessie Coleman was the first African-American and first Native American female pilot.
Oh.
So she was known for performing flying tricks. She had these nicknames. She was like Brave Bessie, Queen Bess, and the only race Avatrix
Oh, Avatrix.
in the world.
What about Yes Queen?
Yeah, it should have been in there. She was born in Atlanta, Texas. I didn't know there was an Atlanta, Texas, but there you are.
Huge.
It is January 26th, 1892. She had 12 brothers and sisters. 12! So crazy. So many. Her mother was an African-American who worked as a maid, and her father was a mix of Native American and African-American, and he worked as a sharecropper.
Oh.
And Bessie grew up picking cotton with her mother and did laundry and stuff like that to earn extra money. And by the time she was 18, she saved enough money to go to what is now known as Langston University in Oklahoma. Back then, it was called the Colored Agriculture and Normal University.
Okay.
Catchy name.
Yeah.
But she actually ended up dropping out after only one semester because she couldn't afford to keep going there. So at age 23, she moved in with her brothers in Chicago and she went to beauty school. She was not a beauty school dropout.
Very singy episode.
It really is. And she started working as a manicurist at a local barbershop. And her brothers had served in the military in World War I. And they would tell her all these stories about their time in France. And she learned that in France, women can be pilots. In America, you couldn't. Like schools wouldn't even take you. So inspired by their stories, she's like, I really want to be a pilot. And she did apply to a lot of flight schools all across the country. And none of them would take her because she was African-American and a woman. It's like, how dare you? Oh, my. So she was like, well, they can learn in France. So she began taking French classes at night and filled out her application and got accepted.
Wow.
To the, it's like Caudron Brothers School of Aviation in France. And she got her international pilot's license in 1921. And she had this idea that she was going to open her own flight school and she wanted to make flying accessible to everyone who wanted to get pilot licenses, basically. So she would go on like a tour, right? And do all these speeches and like they would film her like doing all of her air tricks, you know, and show them. And she would not speak anywhere that was segregated or had any kind of discriminatory policies.
Wow.
Which fucking rad. And in 1922, she performed the first public flight by an African-American woman. She was famous for doing the loop-de-loops and the airplane, the 8, like the Circle 8 in an airplane. And people would just come from all over to like watch her. And she was always encouraging like African-Americans and women to take flying lessons. And then in April 1926, she was actually on a test flight with someone else named William Willis. He was flying and she was in the passenger seat, and a wrench got loose and actually got into the engine and it flipped over the plane and they were both killed, which is really, really sad. Famous activist Ida B. Wells Barnett performed at her funeral service. It was in Chicago. And in 1931, the Challenger Pilots Association of Chicago started a tradition of flying over Coleman's grave every year.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. So, and then by 1977, African-American women pilots formed the Bessie Coleman Aviators Club. And then a stamp was issued in 1995.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. She sounds awesome. So thank you, listener Mary, for sending that my way. I'm like, she sounds awesome.
She does sound amazing, and we do totally appreciate that. And we have said sometimes finding the non-creep is just so difficult depending on the person we're talking about. So we totally appreciate that. Thank you. And
yes.
if you appreciate the sound of our voices, if you've made it this far, you probably do.
I hope so.
We co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. And Sonia, what are we covering next?
This is not a drill, people. It's finally happening. Pump Up the Volume is on HBO Max. Woo! You can't see me, but I'm actually like rocking back and forth. Like I'm so giddy. One of our listeners, Kristen, requested this 2 years ago and it is never streaming. And every week we're like, is it streaming yet? Is it streaming yet? Is it streaming? It's finally streaming. So we're going to do Pump Up the Volume and I can't wait.
It's going to be amazing. If you have any suggestions, by the way, for creeps and non-creeps, feel free to reach out to us in all the ways we spoke about before. We love it when you use the Annie Potts GIF. We got one from Ghostbusters.
It still makes me laugh.
It still makes me giggle every time. But you can be clever. Pick anything you want.
Yes.
Be sure to subscribe. That way you'll never miss an episode. And Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Twitter and Instagram and the TikTok, where I'm there to ruin it for the kids. How about you, Margot?
You could find me at Brooklyn Fit Chick, mostly for Twitter and Instagram. My TikTok is Margot Donahue. My site is Brooklyn Fit Chick. Thank you all so much. Stay warm, stay safe wherever you are. We'll be back soon. And in the meantime, don't be a creep.
Creep!
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.